England vs. France. The 100 Years' War in 10 minutes. What is up? It's me. And today we're going to go over one of the longest wars in history, the 100 Years' War between England and France. The 100 Years' War was fought from 1337 to 1453, but there were two distinct phases: French dominance and English dominance. First phase began in 1337 when King Philip VI of France seized the English-controlled territory of Agincourt. When Edward III of England took the throne in 1327, he inherited a kingdom that had been bleeding resources trying to support his father's endless crusades. But with peace at home, Edward III could focus on acquiring new land for himself. In 1329, Edward III invaded and conquered several French territories along the northern coast. Then, in 1335, the King of France, called Philip VI, assembled a coalition of allies and launched an invasion of England. However, it was repelled. So in response, Edward III invaded France again in 1337, where he won an overwhelming victory at the Battle of Crécy. This battle is particularly notable for being the first major battle where gunpowder weapons were used. Longbows and cannons played a huge role in breaking the French lines and putting them to flight. Following his victory, Edward III claimed the French throne, though this claim would be rejected by the Pope. After more back and forth, another decisive battle occurred in 1346 at the Battle of Poitiers. Once again, Edward III bested the French, capturing the French king himself. With the capture of the French king, much of the southern half of France came under English control. Over the next few decades, the English pushed further south, conquering much of Aquitaine and Gascony. During this time, the Black Death ravaged Europe, killing millions. Both sides in the war suffered greatly, and it seemed that neither side would be able to mount a serious campaign. But then in 1364, a new French king, Charles V, took the throne. Charles V was determined to win back his lost lands and drive the English out of France. He made a treaty with the English, but soon after broke it, launching an attack on Agincourt. As the war raged on, the English and French went back and forth, neither gaining the upper hand. In 1369, Charles V captured the city of Reims, which was a major blow to the English, because it was the traditional coronation site for French kings. By 1380, much of northern France was once again in English hands. And this is how the first phase of the war ended. This phase of the war lasted from 1337 to 1380. And during this time, the English overwhelmingly dominated the battlefield. Now, the second phase would begin. The second phase of the war began in 1415 with the Battle of Agincourt. Leading up to this battle, the French king, Charles VI, tried to regain lost territory and asked for help from Spain and Scotland. But those requests were denied. Instead, King Henry V of England invaded France, where he met a much larger French force at Agincourt. The English longbowmen decimated the French cavalry, winning an overwhelming victory. This victory allowed the English to advance further into France. Within 3 years, they had taken Paris and had laid siege to the city of Orleans. However, in 1429, everything changed. Joan of Arc arrived on the scene and lifted the siege. Soon after, she led the French to victory at the Battle of Poitiers. After this victory, Joan of Arc continued to lead the French to many other victories. But in 1430, she was captured by the Burgundians and sold to the English. She was put on trial for heresy and witchcraft and was burned at the stake. Despite her execution, the momentum had shifted to the French. Over the next few years, they recaptured much of their lost territory, and by 1443, only a small portion of northern France was left under English control. From 1443 until 1453, the French were steadily pushing the English back, and in 1453, the English surrendered all of their remaining territory, marking the end of the war. This phase of the war lasted from 1415 to 1453, and during this time, the French overwhelmingly dominated the battlefield. So why did the English lose? Well, there are many factors that contributed to the English loss. One was that they simply ran out of money. The 100 Years' War drained the English treasury, and without the wealth to maintain a large army, they were no longer able to hold their ground against the French. Another reason was the decline of the English nobility. At the beginning of the war, the English nobility were fierce fighters who led the English to many victories. However, By the middle of the 10th century, the nobility had become lazy and corrupt. Many of them had abandoned military life for more luxurious pursuits such as hunting and jousting. Finally, there was the rise of the French artillery. By the end of the war, the French had developed superior cannons that were able to breach the English defenses and allow French troops to enter their castles. Now let's look at some of the major battles of the war. First, the Battle of Crécy. The Battle of Crécy took place on August 29, 1346, near the village of Crécy. It was fought between the armies of England and France. The English were led by King Edward III and the French by King Philip VI. Second, the Battle of Agincourt took place on October 25, 1415. It was fought between the armies of England and France near the village of Agincourt in northeastern France. The English army consisted of around 9,000 men, while the French force was around 30,000. The battle began with the French charging forward, but they were repelled by the English longbows. The French then retreated, regrouped, and charged again, but they were repelled again. This happened several times throughout the day, but the French were eventually exhausted and began to flee. Overall, the English had around 1,000 casualties, while the French lost around 7,000. This battle was a turning point in the war, as it allowed the English to take Paris and lay siege to Orleans. Third, the Battle of Poitiers. The Battle of Poitiers took place on June 18, 1429, near the village of Poitiers, in central France. It was fought between the armies of England and France. The English were led by Sir John Talboys and the French by Jean de Dunois and Jacques de Bou. Why should you care about this war? Well, this war was one of the longest in history, and it had a profound impact on both France and England. The war led to the rise of nationalism in both countries, and it also helped to shift the balance of power in Europe. Now you know the basics of the 100 Years' War. Do you think the English were right to start the war? Or do you think the French were justified in wanting their land back? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you want to watch another one of my videos, click here. If you want to watch another one of my general series videos, click here. Thanks for watching!